what's that one key learning or one incident or one takeaway that you have from all of those 4 different geographies?
I ended up going off to be a volunteer in Ghana through an organisation called Voluntary Service Overseas, VSO. That is an important part in my development as an educator, because it made me value resources, and technology in particular can be used so powerfully.
As a leader, what are the top priorities, top ideas, and top challenges that you see coming towards you that you would want to face head on?
I think one of the biggest challenges in this day and age, in terms of setting up a school like this, is identifying and developing teachers who can deliver and inspire in the way that we want them to.
When you look for a teacher, whether a fresh, newly qualified teacher or somebody with 3 years of experience, 5, 10 years or 10 years of experience, what are some of the key things that you look for?
The things that I like to explore are much more about the questions like,
hello everybody, welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Inspiring Educators. Well, we have a global inspirational leader with us today. And I was just talking right before hitting the record button, I was talking to Tony and getting to know his journey, and got to know how somebody who did not want to become a teacher ended up becoming a global education leader. And I know that you're going to love this story. So before I get into introducing and sharing more details, I am going to invite him to share his details. But just as a beginning, today, Tony Wright, Mr. Tony Wright, just let me put it like that, is the principal of Manchester Global School in India. He's building up this mind-blowing legacy IB school with a simple vision that how many Nobel laureates can this school create. This is going to be inspirational, guys. Tony, welcome to the podcast, and I request you to please introduce yourself.
thank you so much, Rishabh. I think that giving the big intro, I think I should tell them how that story came about. And your question to me was, how did I end up where I am today? And I threw it back at you to tell you about the student that came into my office this week and asked me, why did I choose to be a principal? And I said, I'm only doing this until I decide what I'm going to do with my career. And I think that kind of sums up how I ended up where I am. But it also sums up how much I love my work. As a teacher and an educator, I think that I wouldn't still be doing this 25 years after I started the journey. I wouldn't be doing that unless I really, really loved it. So a little bit about myself. I am currently working here at Manchester Global School, just on the outskirts of Hyderabad. And the vision that the founding chairman and the board have here is to create this legacy school that inspires students from the minute they walk through the door to the minute that they graduate. They're going to walk into this environment with amazing infrastructure and amazing teachers that will help to inspire leaders, entrepreneurs, and people with a really industrious drive within themselves to create and become leaders in the world. So it's a really exciting place. We've been open since March of 2024. So we've just come into our 2nd year, and we're well down that road of getting our authorizations for the IB. We have a CBSE section as well, which is going to celebrate the new learning that the NEP for India, the new education policy that was brought in 2020, it's celebrating all the bits of that make learning more enjoyable. And I think that we're doing a really good job of inspiring our students. And I'm really happy to be talking about how to inspire educators as well today.
Got it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tony, while we were discussing, you mentioned that you've been an educationist, an education leader, an educator in almost 4 continents around the world. Would love to hear from you. What's that one key learning or one incident or one takeaway that you have from all of those 4 different geographies? If you could just pick up one geography at a time and share, hey, this is what were the conditions, this is what happened, and this is the key big takeaway from that geography.
Okay, I think the first thing that I would say is that I am a very naturally glass half full kind of person. And therefore, any challenges, any difficulties at any point, I always try and look for the positives in a situation as much as I can in that moment. And I think if I look back to how I started out in education, I didn't think I was going to be in education. My parents, both educators, advised me against it. Working conditions for teachers in the UK, maybe not as good as they might be in other professions. I had a place offered to me at medical school in Cardiff, and I didn't get the grades to go there automatically. So I thought, right, clearing process. I will study something connected to medicine. Oh, what's for neuroscience? Didn't even know what it was when I first saw it. But actually, the neuroscience has ended up being a key part of the leadership side in education, understanding how the brain works, understanding a lot of the psychology of development and growth and learning is really important. And increasingly, how mental health is affecting young people these days. So those factors and studying that at university is probably today more relevant than I ever thought it might be. So when I completed university, I needed a bit of a break. I wanted to get away from learning and taking exams. I can empathize with students who are going through exams very much. And I ended up going off to be a volunteer in Ghana through an organization called Voluntary Service Overseas, VSO. And they asked me, would I become a teacher and go to a government school in the rainforest in Ghana, in West Africa? Very remote, very isolated in terms of connectivity. It was 2002, and it was a case of no internet. I think there were 2 direct phone lines that you could phone out from the town that I was in, Asankrangwa. So making the most of that environment would be the first challenge. Very little electricity, but trying to teach technology, trying to teach how to use a basic old-fashioned BBC computer using limited electricity, limited resources, teaching science in that environment. But I learned a huge amount about how to be resourceful.
And Anthony, just for the listeners to understand,
Yeah.
you're talking about the year 2000, early 2000s, right?
2002, yes.
2002. So everybody. So just for our listeners to know, we're talking about 2002 when internet was not an everyday thing that everybody would have on their fingertips. People would not even have email IDs, right? People would still trying to figure out how email works. People were still trying to figure out how technology can be a part of their lives. The classrooms were still chalk and board mostly. The classrooms were not smart boards everywhere. There would be maybe one computer or a couple computers in schools, and I still remember that the computer labs would be the only access that a student might have to the computers. So
Absolutely.
very
I had to,
time that we're talking about. Tony.
if I had to send an email, I had to drive for 2.5 hours to get a stable internet connection to send an email. So it was a different world. It was a different world, but a very enjoyable world. In the afternoon, instead of going and sitting and playing around on a mobile phone, we'd go and play football with the students. We'd play badminton with the students. We'd play chess. It was a real, back to the genuine human connections. And I'm still friends with some of those students now. A couple of years back, I flew out to Ghana for one of their weddings. So that is an important part in my development as an educator, because it made me value resources, and technology in particular can be used so powerfully. So moving on from Ghana, I went back to the UK and decided that actually, despite what my parents said, teaching is very rewarding. Yes, it's got great holidays, but actually those human connections, every day is different, the different challenges that come up with different environments, different students, and decided that I should probably get a qualification and do that until I decided what I want to do. Yeah. So I went back, ended up working, doing a friend. It was actually a friend of my dad, was not a director. He was a board member at a government school in Liverpool, where we're from. And I spent about 2 years working in this very rough school with very low academic achievement. 43% of the students had a diagnosed challenge in their learning, a diagnosed special need. And again, there's a challenge in that. There's a lot of effort needs to go in, even to get the lowest grades. Trying to engage those students, manage the behavior in an area that was, known for the bad behavior of many of the students. I think that taught me a lot about classroom management, but most of all, it taught me that if I can put on a lesson where the students enjoy what they're doing, their behavior improves, but also they get better results. So I think that was pivotal in my understanding of what actually makes good learning, good teaching and learning. Students who are actively engaged, they're going to do better, they're easier to manage. And I took that with me. I then moved on to my previous school, the school that I attended in Liverpool, were the other end of the academic spectrum. Great results. And a lot of the teachers would come and they'd stay there for a whole career. And in fact, sharing a desk with my wonderful biology teacher, he inspired me to pursue biology and areas of biological sciences. Sharing a desk with him made me realize that I could stay there for 35 years. But for me, I wanted a sense of adventure. I wanted to move internationally and learn about the world. So I ended up taking a job in Nigeria. Not everyone's first on the list of places to work, but I moved to a wonderful school, family-run boarding school, out in the countryside, well away from the big cities, away from all the trouble that Nigeria sometimes is associated with. And I worked with wonderful people for 2 years as both a biology teacher, but also the leadership potential in me was recognized, and I was given the opportunity to lead the management and the day-to-day running of the primary school. So it helped me to understand primary school curriculum, looking at the development of literacy and numeracy in early years right the way through, and having an understanding already with my secondary school training really has equipped me well for what I've gone on to do with the rest of my career. After 2 years in Nigeria, I really wanted to become an international baccalaureate teacher. The philosophy of making the world a better place through teaching students about how they can do that, about understanding themselves as learners with characteristics, but also being really academically rigorous was something that I was really intent on doing. It didn't happen for me in Nigeria, so I moved to Prague, to the English College in Prague, where I was trained as an IB biology teacher. And after 2 years there, I was headhunted to move to Switzerland, to one of the most exclusive, most expensive boarding schools in the Swiss Alps, College Alpine Beausoleil. It's in the top 3 or 4 in the world in terms of school fees, and it's 100% live-in boarding. I moved there as the head of science. Very quickly, I took on house parent responsibilities in boarding, and eventually I took on a maternity leave and ended up becoming the head of seniors, where I spent 4.5 of the 6 years in the mountains as the head of seniors, looking after the IB diploma students, the American high school diploma students, and supporting them in their learning and their journeys onto university. After 6 years in a village of 5,000 people, just 5,000 people, I thought probably time for a bit of a change of environment. I wonder what could be the opposite end of that spectrum. And I had options to move to Cairo, to New York, and to Mumbai. Which one's got the biggest population? Let's go there. So I chose Mumbai. To be honest, I'd actually visited Mumbai. I've never been to New York. I've never been to Cairo. I had been to Mumbai. I love my cricket. I love Indian food. I love the culture. It wasn't really a choice to make. So I moved to Oberoi. Well, you've got to have something to base your decisions on, and mine are never rational decisions. It was a great opportunity. I was head of high school and then subsequently became head of secondary school there at Oberoi International School. And it was a wonderful learning environment. We gave the students a lot of power in their voice in terms of the student council. We set up things like a sports council, and sports became really high profile in the school. We improved the IB diploma scores. They went up to 38 in 2022, 38 out of 45, amongst the highest in India and some of the highest in the world. So that was a great opportunity to learn a lot about Indian culture. I spent a year in Dubai as whole school, head of school at Ambassador International Academy, where I learned a huge amount about managing a learning community of very, very diverse nationalities. And after a year there, I was given the wonderful opportunity to become a founding principal here at Manchester Global School. And the journey of learning and discovery over the last 2 years for everyone has been an absolute joy to be part of. I think that the vision that the board have and the input that they put in financially, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the personnel that we've brought together here, it's certainly, for me, the most exciting school in the southern half of India, possibly the whole of India today.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Anthony, just to put this all together, so your journey started in a location, in a geography where you had to identify, create resources sometimes so that education could happen. You went back to the UK and you started teaching in schools where you met students who had access, or school which had access to resources, but students had learning needs, learning disabilities, and you were identifying ways of supporting everybody and making sure that the results were being achieved. You went to went to a school where you knew that you could just stay there and retire from there 35 years later, but you said, no, this is not what I want to do. I want another challenge. And then you went on to moving countries. And I know going to skip one experience, but I'm going to go to Switzerland straight from there, where you actually were working with a small group of students with all the resources possible in the world. There's like no resources, available resources, every resource possible in the world. And you kind of saw all of those different sides, different angles of what all education can offer to everybody around the world. Then you went on to do, a leadership role at one of the most iconic schools in Mumbai, and you built it from where it was and took it ahead. And now you are, and of course, and then there was Dubai, and then now you're back to a school trying to build it from the scratch in a way that it can build a legacy, and you have the best educational outcomes coming out, not just in forms of student scores, but in form of real impact in the world. Did I put it all correct?
No, I think yes. I mean, the experiences that I've had have been incredibly diverse and therefore are very helpful in terms of contextualizing where I am now.
Yeah.
It gives me a huge bank of anecdotal stories that I can talk to people about. I'm lucky. I take after my mother. She was a good storyteller. My dad was a good storyteller too, but my mum liked to talk. And that puts me in the fortunate position that when I talk to people, I can engage them in understanding different contexts.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a good leader needs to be able to do, to help other people contextualize their role, the task that they've been asked to complete, and to understand the impact of what they're doing. And doing that in different environments is a completely different set of challenges. And whether it's the most affluent school, one of the most affluent schools in the world with endless resources, but actually the students have been some of the hardest to inspire and engage in their learning because they have everything. They never need to work a day in their lives. The opposite end, where you've got, you're making models of the human body out of cardboard, and you're getting students to go and catch their own beetles because we've not got enough textbooks to draw them from. So you're going to have to catch one and pin it down and draw from the actual animal. The joy of learning in that community was very different because they were inspired because they knew that the best way out of their socioeconomic status is to get an education. And, I'm delighted that I'm in touch with, I'm probably in touch with about 20 of them through social media now that I taught back in Ghana. And I'd say of them, you've got doctors, you've got engineers, you've got ophthalmologists, you've got lawyers, you've got journalists. They've gone on to do some wonderful things that have changed their family's future. And that is just as special as sitting in a classroom with an amazing view of the Swiss Alps, looking at electronic resources on an iPad that you couldn't have dreamt of just a few years before. So I've been very lucky to be in very, very different settings. And I think that it does enable me to inspire people to do things a little bit differently in certain circumstances.
Got it. So with this diverse and robust experience base that you have, going ahead and building, I'll not call it a school, I'll call it an institution, which now is looking up to you to define what the nuts and the bolts, what the first principles of education should look like in this new setup. So as a leader, what are the top priorities, top ideas, and top challenges that you see coming towards you that you would want to face head on, and you would like to define that, okay, if I get these three things right, I know we'll have the direction set right for the organization. What are some of those ideas?
I think, first of all, it's important to understand that it's not just me here. There is a founding chairman with such a strong pedigree in education. Dr. Kondal Reddy Kandari He was the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Bolton University in the UK. He was there for 20 years, has his PhD from there, and he understands what learning should look like and feel like. And that makes this role very different to any of my previous roles. I've worked with some amazing people, amazing boards, but his understanding and his clarity of articulation of the vision that he and the board have, making this role, it's very easy to understand what my role is within the institution. We've got a fabulous CBSE principal who is transforming the way CBSE is delivered so that the NEP 2025, all the elements of that are embodied with what we've created from scratch. And that means that learning for our CBSE students is, it's not quite as hands-on and as practical as the International Baccalaureate curriculum, but it's exciting and it's engaging and it's a lot more interesting than the traditional CBSE approach may be in other schools still. So I think that being part of a team that share a vision is very, very important. And it's been the right opportunity at the right time for me to come in with my experience and help transfer that to coordinators, teachers on the academic side for the IB. I think one of the biggest challenges in this day and age in terms of setting up a school like this is identifying and developing teachers who can deliver and inspire in the way that we want them to. I think that there's a very rapid growth in the number of international schools, and in particular, international baccalaureate schools in India, in China, in the Middle East, in Dubai. The number of IB schools is growing very rapidly. And it used to be that when someone opened a school, they'd pick around all the different IB schools around them, and they'd pick a couple of teachers from here, a couple of teachers from here, come and join us. And you built a very strong team very quickly. These days, it's not a case of being able to do that because the market is so dynamic. With so many schools opening up, the teachers can pick and choose their jobs very, very quickly. Wow. So there's a challenge there in making sure you get the right team. And for me, building a team is about making sure that you have a balance. Yes, you do want some of those teachers that have 10 years of experience in the IB curriculum because you need a coordinator. You need someone who knows all the background requirements, all the infrastructure, the resources, where to go for this and that, and how to get the program set up. But more relevant now, I feel, is having students who engage the learners. Changes in technology, changes in pedagogy, changes in understanding how we learn through neuroscience have been so rapid over the last 15 or 20 years that many teachers who've got 10 years of experience are outdated in their pedagogy and their practices. Yeah. I think that if you overload a school with those teachers, you might end up with good results, but you might end up with very uninspired students. Yeah. What I prefer to do is go out and find young, dynamic, want-to-be teachers, people who are curious about the world, who want to engage with young adults and young children and help to grow them as learners and train them in the ways of the IB. And we've done a really good job. I've been off to a couple of universities and recruited directly from the likes of Azim Premji, taken graduates directly, and we train them. We give them a year working alongside teachers. They'll take some of their own classes. And in the second year, they've come in and now they're running their own timetables, running their own classes independently with an inspired approach. They've got an understanding of modern technology. They've got an understanding of youngsters' mindsets today, which are very different to 10 years ago. And I think that that is key. Building a mixed team of young, dynamic, energetic teachers, along with the experience and the wisdom of teachers that have been doing it for a long time, helps to build a learning community that's going places.
Beautiful. And just to continue this part of the conversation, when you look for a teacher, whether a fresh, newly qualified teacher or somebody with 3 years of experience, 5, 10 years or 10 years of experience, what are some of the key things that you look for? And, how do you identify those things?
I rely a lot on interview. I rely on my HR to show me a CV or set of CVs of candidates with the right qualifications to work in our school. And based on the paper, we then decide who we're going to interview. I prefer a letter. I prefer to read a letter that I can pick out which bits they've associated with the school's vision and mission. I think that that's really important, that someone shows the research about the school. Look at what fits. It's not a good fit if a school is very forward thinking in its approach to technology, and you barely know how to send an email. That's not going to, that will come out very quickly. So once we've gotten past the paper examination, we'll then shortlist and bring in candidates for an interview with myself and my coordinators. And the things that I like to explore are much more about the questions like, tell me a story about inspiring a student. Tell me a story about helping a student go beyond the curriculum. Tell me a story about how you've supported a student who's really been struggling. Tell me where you've made a difference. Because I think that understanding those stories, understanding the impact that a human being has on other human beings is much better than asking for, oh, tell me the statistics. How many students got a 6 out of 7 or 7 out of 7 in your last DP cohort? Because I'll be honest, a student who's likely to get a 7 out of 7 will probably do it regardless of the teacher that's in front of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Bright students will often do it for themselves. The difference a good teacher makes is to make sure they reach that, but more impact on those average students or those low ability students to getting them up to a better grade. I think that that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for teachers who can tell me the story of how they've made a difference. Based on that, I'll then check references. I'll reach out and say, look, I've heard a story about this. You may not know the exact story, but does this sound like the teacher that's come from your school? And I think that that's an important part, checking the background of the teacher, not just the basics, but are they genuine? Are they telling me a story that is believable and that actually reflects how they are known in their current school?
Got it. So to put it all together, how does the teacher think? How do they work on overall growth and development, not just high achievers, but how do they identify progress and attainment on the nth learner in the classroom? And finally, everything that they're saying, does their story get triangulated?
Yes.
And can somebody really stand by what they've shared? And is there an evidence of impact that they're talking about?
And one thing that I go back to during the 6-month appraisal review, you're on a probationary period in any school for the first 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever that school has. But part of that review meeting is me saying, look, you talked about this when the interview came. Tell me where you've done that here. Trying to make sure that they are held accountable to what they've said in an interview, because a lot of people are generous with how they describe things in an interview. And it's important that we make sure that they are what they say they are. And, it's increasingly challenging for educators, particularly in the IB sector, particularly here in India. There's a lot of conversations going on about the fact that there's so many teachers who are not reflecting the values of the IB in the way that they approach their next job. Not being upfront with their current employers that they might be leaving, not being upfront about the period of time before they move, not being upfront about what experience they've actually got. And that's a really challenging dynamic. But a lot of the heads of school now are much more connected and talking about these issues, and a lot more names are coming to light that we don't want to employ because of their track record in that area.
Got it. And all of that, I understand, is with experienced teachers who've tried to be there, and and I understand that there are always good players and bad players in every ecosystem.
Mostly good. I'll be very honest.
Mostly good.
The majority of people are very good.
Now, I want to turn it around towards somebody who wants to become an IB teacher, or somebody who wants to become a teacher, or somebody who's thinking about, should I become a teacher? I've just completed my master's in mathematics. I've been thinking of doing my bachelor's in education, doing my IB certification. Do I do it? Do I not do it? And let's say somebody finally took that call, did it, and now they don't have any background, they don't have any experience, but they are a mind-blowing teacher. How would you evaluate them?
I go looking for them, and I was very lucky. The process that was run at Azim Premji University down in Bangalore was wonderful. They allowed us to come onto their campus to present to any students that might be interested in becoming teachers with Manchester Global School. And there were other schools there on the same day doing a similar process. And for our recruitment process, though, we did it a little bit differently. We didn't just interview. We didn't look at their exam scores. What we did was we said, this is our school. This is an approximate profile of what our students are like. Now, depending on your subject area or your age group, I want you to now go and spend an hour designing a lesson. I want you to design a lesson. I also want you to physically make or prepare a resource for that lesson. I'm giving them a critical thinking task.
Yeah.
I want to see how they approach it. And some of them came back within the hour, they presented the lesson plan and the resource. They left it on the table. And then we called them back one at a time for half an hour to talk through the process. How did you come up with the activity? How did you create the resource? What's the thinking behind it? What are you expecting from this? I had the kind of conversation that I would have with a 5-year, 10-year experienced teacher in an interview, but based on an activity that they'd done so that I can assess how they think. And based on that, that's how we decided on, I think we employed 6 altogether. I think we've got 5 of them with us. One backed out for personal reasons and went somewhere else, but 5 of them have joined us and they are fabulous in the classrooms. We've got 2 of them working in the early years. We've got a maths teacher, an INS teacher, and one that's taken on biology and psychology this year for us. So, they've come in with a real appetite to learn and a real demonstration of what hard work means as a young teacher. I think if someone's thinking about going into international baccalaureate school teaching or international Cambridge school teaching, I think getting an insight, making a connection with someone who works in a school who can have you come in for a day or 2 days observing the lessons with them. Schools won't let you just walk in and sit in the back of a classroom. Those days are long gone. But if you can be accompanied in and learn a little bit more from an experienced teacher or someone who's in a good school, get an understanding of what it looks like. It's not, you don't just turn up at the classroom door and it all happens inside the classroom and then you leave and you're done. There's a lot of collaborative planning. There's a lot of understanding of what's going on in the world around us today that factors into the planning of the lessons, particularly in the IB. So I think get a good insight. And from there, it's then a case of making sure you've got the necessary qualifications. A good IB school will not expect you to turn up with an IB workshop certificate. You can only register for those. You can only attend those workshops if you're associated with an IB school. Therefore, if you've already got one and you've never worked in an IB school, I'd be asking questions. Have you managed that? But more to the point is that a good school will recognize a good teacher. Maybe you've taken a couple of demo lessons. Maybe you've applied and it's your first international teaching post abroad, and you've gotten through that interview process. They will provide you with that training. And the IB workshops are fantastic for understanding the philosophy, but you can find out some of that philosophy, the IB learner profile, the curriculum guides, the what's actually contained in the biology curriculum, what's contained in the maths curriculum. All of that is on the IB website. Do your homework. Go and find out a little bit more. Because if you do turn up and you've not bothered to do anything, it's not creating a good first impression. But there's lots of resources, there's lots of YouTube channels, and increasingly podcasts that talk about these kind of areas. So get on LinkedIn and have a look through for resources on there.
Got it. So let's go to the last part of the podcast, Tony. So in this part, I like to do a role play. I like to do a role play activity with the education leaders. And the role play that you have to do is you have to play the role of a sales professional.
Right.
Now, what you're selling is the teaching profession.
Right.
And whom you're selling to is, say, you're standing in the middle of a stadium with 20,000 fresh graduates from different parts of the world. So think of every city that you've taught in and think of a graduate, 21-year-old, thinking about what should I do with my life. All of them are sitting in this stadium. You're on a stage at the center of the stadium. And you have to pitch teaching as a profession to them. What all should they be considering? What all should they be thinking about? And what should they keep in mind while deciding whether they should pick teaching as their next part of the journey or not? I know teaching is not has not in the past not been as attractive, which has led to huge teacher shortages around the world. But I feel that's the responsibility that you and I have today, that we sell our profession right to the next generations. So that's the role play. You're going to be my friend, my partner in selling the profession to the next generation, and you'll have to do it in a way that as if you're standing in the middle of that stadium and you're speaking to this huge crowd and telling them what is it about.
Okay. Right, I'm gonna put one imposition of my assumptions in here that I have a very large LCD screen in this stadium.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
got a big screen, and on that screen, I would start off with pictures. I would
Yeah.
have pictures of different students of mine who are now adults and grown up, and I've got their permission to show their picture. And I would put pictures of, the student that I taught in my very first year of teaching that I now know has a job in the police force in the UK. They're from a really rough school in Liverpool. They're now up on that screen as a police person. They've got their little kids with them, and they will have on there, there'll be a small piece of text saying what I did in the class where they got in trouble and they learned from that mistake, and they've come good after that point.
Got
I'd
it.
have a picture probably from my days in Ghana. My dear friend, Dr. Francis, who I hope will see this. I will share this with him. He went off from school in the rainforest in Ghana. He's become a doctor through studying in the Ukraine. He's now working as a doctor in Ghana, and it's changed his family's life. I'd have a picture up there from Switzerland of one of the super affluent youngsters, probably a student who was in all sorts of trouble with me, who is now a yoga instructor in London and doing something that is absolutely right for her. I'd put a picture up of students from Mumbai talking about some of the real challenges they may have had with mental health and how they've overcome that, and now they are working in law in Mumbai. I think that I'd also throw in there a picture or a couple of pictures of my teaching colleagues who've made as big a difference as I have in those different schools, and tell their story as well. Because nobody goes into teaching and learning to become rich.
Yeah.
Very, very few people end up going through a career, coming out as multimillionaires, never having to work a day at the age of 50. That's not what we're in it for. We're in it to change lives. And the IB for me is the best philosophical approach to learning that there is out there at the moment. I'd make changes to it if I was in charge of it. That's a different podcast. But I think that there is enough in the teaching profession to be rewarding, to live a good life, and to make a huge difference to the world ahead of us. Because at the moment, there's too many educational systems and too many individuals who are not making the right kind of noises in the world and the right movements in the world to make the world a better place. And the IB, I think, is the key to that, as far as I'm concerned. So that's how I would address my audience of 20,000 prospective teachers.
Got it. Got it. And if you had to now directly address and state a couple of sentences after
Okay.
you've shown these pictures.
The short version.
Yeah. No, so I want that to be recorded as a pitch, because I'm going to take that out and I'm going to show it to university students in different parts of the world that, hey, this is Tony Wright,
Yeah.
who's so and so. So a couple of sentences of direct pitch.
I think anybody who goes into teaching and spends more than 10 years teaching any age group, you will touch hundreds of lives. And that is your chance to make a difference. And education isn't about coming out with a great understanding of maths or the theory of knowledge. It's about creating good human beings with the knowledge and the skills to make a difference in the world. That's why I love teaching.
Superb. Superb. Thank you so No, thank you so much. But this really makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure this podcast is going to help educators get inspired, not just from a perspective of your journey across continents. That's mind-blowing. You are, in true sense, a global educator, but also how you face challenges and you found solutions for them from time to time. So I think that's something that stood out for me.
Every day in a school has challenges. I could list the challenges I faced today and yesterday in terms of some student behavior. Every school has that. If you go into a day thinking it's going to be an easy day and you're going to achieve only the things you've got on your to-do list, if you're in leadership in a school, forget it. It doesn't work like that. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. I think the other thing that is that, anyone can get now onto that international ladder with the right qualifications through the right universities. I've supported a huge number of colleagues from India now over the last 10 years. in taking those first steps onto the international journey. And, I'm now seeing colleagues that I worked with in the first 2 or 3 years at Oberoi who are now on their third or fourth country around the world doing the same adventure.
Oh,
And
wow.
that is awesome. That for me is so exciting to just be in a small part of their journey, even if it's just, sharing the link for which university to go to for the qualification, or sharing a recommendation for a recruiter who I know is looking for an English teacher or a maths teacher at that particular moment. Little things like that go a long way to helping other people on their journey. And that's what life is about. And I hope that people in education see we're just helping people become better in themselves.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of the insights today, Tony.
No
Um,
worries.
I know it's been a mind-blowing podcast for all the listeners. I know that people are going to save this podcast and keep coming back to this one over and over again and share with more people to get inspired. And we all can't thank you for being
If
here.
people have got questions, people who are trying to get on that band, on that journey internationally, I'm very happy if they ping me a question on LinkedIn. I may not answer it immediately. Life is very, very hectic at the moment. There's a lot going on, but I always try and reach out. I've got a phone call this evening with someone who I actually think I've met him about 20 years ago. That's going to be an interesting conversation. Who's reached out to me, who's looking at a move to India, wants to find out about leadership positions in India. I'm happy to have that conversation with people if I can make time. It's always a pleasure to help people on that journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tony. And with that, we conclude our today's podcast. Thank you
It's
so
been a
much,
pleasure.
listeners, to have spent this time with us. And I'll see you soon again with another inspirational educator, another inspirational education leader, and get to know their journey. Have a lovely day ahead, guys.